Hi, I'm Murray Hallam, and I've taught thousands of students over the years about aquaponics. In fact, it's 10 years now I've been doing this, and I've just had such a fantastic time. Do you know what? I've even been featured on 60 Minutes. How about that? It's just the most wonderful thing. I want to show you the power of aquaponics and what it can do for you. Now, I don't care if you're a seasoned practitioner or you're just a raw beginner, or if you're the guy who knows a fair bit about it and you want to go right through and build your own farm. There's going to be stuff in these videos that you're going to find out, great information that we've gleaned as I've travelled all around the world. Look, I've been to all sorts of places. I've seen farms that work fantastically.
All right, now do you hear me? That should be better. Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that, and Eileen. And as I was saying, I call it sprung, just because I'm an old guy. All right, can you hear me yet? Let's see what else is going on. I'm not hearing myself in the earpiece either. Okay, let's see. There we are. Should be good now. There's a long delay between my system and YouTube in my earpiece. It's about 30 seconds. Okay, we're all good. Excellent. Thank you, Eileen, Jonathan, Jesse, and Doug from Diamond Disc Media. My little plug, Doug is my tech guy. He's the guy that keeps us rocking and rolling here. We don't play rock and roll, we play nice music. By the way, that piece of music is from, as you've been seeing, that's from the group Audio Machine, and the album is Life, and that particular selection is Brilliantine. Brilliantine. And I've played quite a few selections from Audio Machine's Life album. I really find most of their productions, their albums, as well as their individual compositions to be just extraordinary. Very positive. You know, we need that. We need positive. And today's a good day for the positive. We're looking at spring. We didn't have much of a winter here in New Hampshire, but that's okay. A little bit of snow just to have some fun, just to say that it's winter, but nothing overwhelming. I feel sorry for the guys that do the private contracting for plowing of the streets and whatnot for the cities and the different complexes, because they didn't get much business this year. But it was a pleasant winter, but it's nice that we're moving on into spring. So in celebration of sprung, as I like to call it, sprung instead of spring, I'd like to talk about something that is completely different. I sent out a quick little thing in Patreon earlier, just before the broadcast, about aquaponics, and I've mentioned aquaponics in the past. And I thought, you know, today it's fitting that we talk about food. We'll talk about GMOs, and we'll talk about computer involvement in growing a food, and we'll talk, you know, about even AI's involvement. And there'll be a few other things. We'll talk about Google gaming through the cloud, a precedent-setting change, not just for gaming, but as you know, with gaming, kind of getting ahead of myself, but as you know, with gaming, where gaming goes in technology, I don't care about the games, but where the technology takes gaming, takes the rest of the world, specifically graphical processing units, GPUs, into what I announced about 2 years ago are quantum processing units, QPUs. So what it means as far as, I'll give you the punchline again, what it means for Google to set up really a universal gaming platform through their cloud. And Microsoft and Amazon are quickly moving to this with gaming specifically, because that is their ability in the cloud to pull in all of the infrastructures in the Internet of all things. And with that in mind, if we have time today, I may talk about packaging. We can talk about food packaging, specifically nanoparticles, nanosensors, nanotransmitters. Nanotransmitters now comprised of graphene, what they describe as a very thin wafer, as a two-dimensional wafer of graphene that now has the ability to transmit. I've seen some articles, and one yesterday sent to me by an engineer friend. I won't mention his name because I have to protect him, but he sends me a wealth of inside information. But I've seen some information that these nanomaterials down around 20 nanometers. A nanometer, again, is a billionth of a meter, that are able to transmit a signal once they've gathered information as a sensor, transmit information as far as 30 meters. Picture that from inside your body or within the food wrapper in the grocery store, and it's communicating in the grocery store. And when you consume it, you're communicating to another system. Again, this pulls in, envelops all of the discussions of not just 5G, but 6G. And it is interesting. You know, we really started hitting 6G a couple of weeks ago in the live streams. And maybe it's kind of like when you look for a specific car, you see them everywhere. But I'm seeing articles now just exploding everywhere about 6G. When, you know, the finger was pointed by the mainstream media at Trump when he said, we need to roll out 5G and 6G, and they accused him of being an idiot, stating that there's no such thing as 6G. Well, now it's just exploding everywhere. As I have given you the inside track in the expectation of 6G is that 6G will roll out much faster than 5G because it's already embedded in the 5G hardware that is being deployed. So 6G is going to be a flip of the switch. And I don't mean that sort of euphemistically, I mean that literally. And these nanosensors comprised of 2D graphene wafers at the billionth of a meter in scale already are being deployed through aerosolized spraying. They are more and more being incorporated into food wrappers, but also all product packaging, and thereby all products, including food. And that's what I want to talk about today is food. So let me check the chat room, see what is happening here. Alrighty, so we've got a great group of people here. I mean, this is just extraordinary. So let me run off through some of the names here just to acknowledge. George and Dave, you guys are always here. That's fantastic. Eileen, Kathy, Brenda, all our usuals. This is great. I love to see consistency here. Free to sing, welcome. Chris, thank you. Yes, we all pray that the rapture will be very soon, and we'll be ready for that. Jonathan, Jesse, and just scanning down through here. You guys are talking fast this morning. You must have had your entangled coffee. Where's my entangled coffee? I got to do my promo. Yep, entangled coffee. There it is. Mine's arriving, I think, tomorrow. I ordered another couple of pounds of beans. All right. Tom, welcome. Excellent. Sheila, very good. All right, so let's get right into this. I'm trying to just have a little bit of fun today. You know, so many of the things that we talk about, I keep saying we need to see it from 30,000 feet. We need to turn it a 180 to see the truth, to, you know, reveal the true message of what's going on, the extrapolation of things like quantum computing and AI. And, you know, I'll be quite honest with you. I sometimes get really bogged down in it. I find it fascinating. I love the process of discovery and sharing with you. But I'm human as much as you are humans, and therefore we are subject to sort of this heavy weight as we examine all of this. And we really see clearly what's going on, and we can anticipate what's coming. And we do this through a biblical perspective, of course. But even at that, I have to share with you that it does weigh on me just the direction the world has always been going in. But this compounding of this sense of evil and the evidence that I present to you of evil, I think it wears on you as much as it wears on me. And I try to be sensitive to the emails that I receive to gauge where you're at. And I think it's time for a little bit of encouragement. So let's go to the scripture. There we are. Okay. So reading from the King James, Matthew 4:19. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now, very familiar to all of you. I'll share just a little bit of commentary on this. I love BibleHub.com, because it gives commentary, it gives a pulpit description. Ellicott's commentary is always superb, and so is the Matthew Henry commentary. So let me just, without trying to paraphrase this, let me take the Matthew Henry commentary, because this is a very familiar, but let's keep it in context, because sometimes it's been used out of context. Okay? When Christ began to preach, he began to gather disciples who should be hearers and afterwards preachers of his doctrine, who should be witnesses of his miracles and afterwards testify concerning them. He went not to Herod's court, not to Jerusalem, among the chief priests and the elders, but to the Sea of Galilee, among the fishermen. The same power which called Peter and Andrew could have wrought upon Ananias and Caiaphas, for with God nothing is impossible. But Christ chooses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. Diligence in an honest calling is pleasing to Christ, and it is no hindrance to a holy life. Idle people are more open to the temptations of Satan than to the calls of God. It is a happy and hopeful thing to see children careful of their parents and dutiful. And when Christ comes, it is good to be found doing. Am I in Christ? Is a very needful question to ask ourselves. And next to that, am I in my calling? They had followed Christ before as common disciples in John 1:37. Now they must leave their calling. Those who would follow Christ aright must, at his command, leave all things to follow him, must be ready to part with them. This instance of the power of the Lord Jesus encourages us to depend upon his grace. He speaks, and it is done. Let me go back to the first sentence here, because I think this is really where I think you and I are all at. When Christ began to preach, he began to gather disciples who would be hearers and afterwards preachers of his doctrine, who should be witnesses of his miracles and afterwards testify concerning them. That's you and I. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth. I don't mean to say who you are and what you're doing. But I think that what we're looking at as followers of Jesus Christ today is this evidence of what is going on. We're witnessing his miracles. I'll give you an example. I always kid around about this bird feeder that I built and I have outside the window here behind the camera. And the birds are out. I mean, I feed them all winter because that's when they really need it. But birds are a miracle, and Scripture even talks about how God provides in a miraculous fashion for the needs of the birds, and therefore would he not provide for us? And certainly he does. So on that note of provision and miracles, it is a miracle that we even awaken every day from our slumber. It's a miracle that we have the blessings that we have. And I think sprung, as I want to call the first day of spring, is a great time to count our blessings and to be thankful for everything that we have. And we all have things we struggle with. We all have our crosses to bear. And there are things that we've had to walk away from, we've had to give up. You know, in my personal testimony, and Kathleen's as well, you know, we've struggled with the separation of our children from us. And I won't go into the personal aspects of that, but there are many people like us, you know, that have a longing to be reconnected with their children. But even Christ said that we have to be willing to give up our families, our parents, our own children, our own offspring to follow him. And that's a heavy burden for all of us. But we're to be encouraged because he does provide for us. He does provide his grace. He's given us the grace and the gift of salvation. The greatest gift that can be given to a creation of God is salvation. And we've been given that gift. And from that we should build out everything in giving thanks. Now, I'm not a preacher, and I'm certainly not a prophet. I'm just a guy that's sharing thoughts with you in a conversation. And you know how to live your life. I don't need to tell you how. I just share with you some of my own thoughts. But right now, in the bird feeder, I mean, there's just this extraordinary little bird all by himself. Just the markings you can imagine, you know, just the distinctive, beautiful markings on a small songbird. Just amazing, his creation. And I feel blessed to be able to sit here and talk to you and look at these guys. Look at these little guys at the same time. It's really inspirational and it's uplifting. And with all of the evidence of evil that we examine in these live streams and in the magazine, I encourage you not to be weighed down by the things that I've shared with you. And that's why I wanted to kind of do a 180 day today and share with you things that are more encouraging and more uplifting. On the note of provision, I would like to start with a gentleman, and I don't know him personally, I don't know his faith, but just his spirit, his demeanor to me speaks of someone who is saved. But he's talking about aquaponics. Now, many people are familiar with the term hydroponics, and that's growing food with a nutrient solution that's provided typically through, nutrient supplements. Let's call them chemicals, if you will, in a water-based environment, and then the roots sit in that water, and that's the hydroponics. Well, aquaponics is very similar, but replacing the chemicals, replacing those nutrient vats, are fish tanks. Fish that provide nutrients to plants. And I won't go into too much detail on this. You can research it on your own. But it's something about, it must be 4 years ago, that I came across this gentleman, Murray Hallam. And he's from Australia. I'll play a little bit of I'll play his introductory video for you. Just a nice gentleman. And he has become world renowned in the past years. I mean, he travels the world and teaches classes to groups that want to set up their own aquaponics operations, either for personal use and or for commercial purposes. The bottom line here is that I view aquaponics not to displace farmers, because I have a number of people that are in farming presently, have their own small farms or are commercial scale farmers and have families that are still operating family farms. So I'm not here to take away, but I'm setting up really what I would consider to be a viable alternative to what I call diesel farming. Diesel farming meaning that if you look at just the amount of diesel fuel that's consumed in modern farming, with all of the equipment that is used on a commercial farm, just that one aspect of energy consumption, that if we were to eliminate the need for diesel consumption, imagine the environmental benefits, okay? But then you have all the associated benefits of having things grown locally with minimal transportation, therefore diesel fuel. The ability to have farms in local communities, even just outside of cities, that are able to provide to the inner cities fresh fruits and vegetables, and even fish, because the fish are harvested in aquaponics, with minimal transport distance involved going from outlying farms to inner cities. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with aquaponics and the trend of both aquaponics and hydroponics to take place within the inner city itself, that warehouses are being converted, that new high-rise buildings are incorporating aquaponics and hydroponics into the architecture of the building from the outset. So even the inner city, and imagine restaurants in the inner cities having the benefit of local delivery of locally grown foods. I mean, imagine this scenario. And this is commonplace too. I'm citing from the research I've done. I know of individuals that they're making $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 a year by doing the following. They go to their friends and neighbors and families who have homes in the city that have backyards, just small backyards, a small plot of ground, maybe a small lawn, maybe even a small garden of their own, or even a swimming pool, converting the backyard into an aquaponics operation that is a very high yield in a small footprint, very high yield growing environment. And doing that with multiple small backyards throughout the city, contracting with people. Oftentimes it's a barter where some of the food that is grown in the backyard by these operators is provided through a weekly harvest to the families that own those small plots of land. The remainder of the crop yield goes to local restaurants. And so they set up with the chefs and the restaurant managers and owners ahead of time that, here's what we can do. What is your menu? What would you like to have included? What sort of fresh foods do you presently have delivered by diesel truck that's coming 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and 100 miles from your restaurant? Would you like to have a local delivery of something that was just picked that day? Well, in the gourmet restaurants, the chefs would be ecstatic with that scenario. Food that's been picked and delivered within a matter of just hours of being served to the customers, definitely the quality of the food and the dining experience would be increased. So that's just one example, one sample. Now imagine doing this for your own family. Now where we live, we have a basement. It's a finished basement. It would be relatively easy for us to convert that into an aquaponics operation. It doesn't require sunlight. You can use grow lights, much like the people who grow marijuana. It's the same sort of setup. Okay? I'm not advocating growing marijuana, but I am saying that the same technology exists. And I shared with you earlier, before the live broadcast, a computer-based system which was demonstrating growing food indoors with grow lights and with computer software to control the environment, the lighting and the temperature, and etc. But that was a hydroponics. That was a chemical-based form of growing. And that's all well and good, but I'll share a little bit of that with you. I shared the video because I can't play it in the live streams. Well, I could. I'm going to play Murray here in just a moment, but I shy away from playing videos because I get copyright hits. Anyway, the point is, if you haven't already, watch that video. It's about 6 minutes long on your own, and it will introduce you to this concept of modular farming that is controlled by open source software. And I applaud this gentleman developing open source software whereby you can set up your own controlled growing environment. And he even goes on to the point of saying, growing, yes, genetically modified foods, but those that are specifically modified for your needs, your physiology, your anatomy. And he said it's much like growing your own pharmaceuticals. Now, in the right application, I think that genetically modified foods, given the environmental impacts that we're experiencing with weather modification, what I call the terraforming of the planet, with the radical changes in our environment underway, we are forced into the situation of modifying foods. What I'm against is the modification of foods in a malevolent fashion, in a destruction of the human species fashion. But again, the 180 to this, if we take the technology instead of looking at it as the evidence of evil, and we imagine that there are practitioners, skilled people in the software and in the growing environment itself, knowledgeable in plants, horticulture, agriculture, that truly are looking at the benevolent application of technology. We have an opportunity with aquaponics and hydroponics, and I really endorse the aquaponics direction, utilizing fish rather than the chemicals. But even with that, we can, with modern technology, tailor the foods to provide those nutrients that our individual bodies, almost like a prescription, almost like writing a prescription. I'm not talking pharmaceuticals in terms of what the pharmaceutical industry puts out, but allowing the plants to be tailored to provide those nutrients that our individual body needs. Hence, it's a pharmacological scenario. But if you need more iron, if you need more potassium, if you need to modify your pH from an acid to an alkaline, you can do that through the foods. And if you have the ability to genetically modify with a simple software program, genetically modify the seeds, and then use the software to grow by tailoring your growing environment from the soils, the nutrients, the fish, the air, the temperature, the light, the humidity. If you can control all of those in a balanced fashion so as to produce targeted nutrients that your specific body needs, because you've been through the testing, you've been through the legitimate assessments of your body's deficiencies, you can grow your own supplements. And this is the direction that Kathleen and I are going. We're still in the research phase. We're still trying to learn about the software, we're trying to learn about the hardware that's involved, and having the appropriate location, indoor location, to do this. Okay, so let me check with the chat room real quick. Let's see, Jonathan, you said, my wife and I are trying to go holistic medicine and all organic foods. It's very hard to do. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Yep. I know that many of you, because you've corresponded with Kathleen and myself, that you're into holistic. I sound like I'm from California, and I am into, but utilize and endorse the holistic medicines and holistic foods and organic foods. Totally agree. Totally agree. All right. So, let's talk about the environment for just a moment here on this sprung day. And it's a beautiful day. But we know that the sun is going through changes. We know that the planets magnetic north and south are migrating. We know that the seasons through that migration are also changing. Our winter, as I said, was very mild, very unusual. Talking to Kathleen and other people that have grown up in New Hampshire, this is very mild, and we are expecting a very hot summer compared to last summer. Summer was extraordinarily warm, very abnormal, and we're expecting an even warmer summer this year. So just on that note, just on the increased ultraviolet radiation we're experiencing that we feel on our skin when we're outside, the changes in the atmosphere itself, because man is modifying the atmosphere, is ionizing the atmosphere, as we had our discussion with Alana Freeland about the ionized sky. We know that everything is being changed in our environment to the negative. And to counter that, to 180 that, we need to be able to take control of those things that we can control. And I honestly believe that we can control our food production ourselves. Whether it's the conversion of a basement like we might end up doing, or if we move to another location, another outbuilding that can be used, but it needs to be done indoors. I'm going to show you Murray Hallam in Australia, and he set up greenhouses, and he has utilized the natural sun for the growing, but he's also demonstrated using growing lights and all of the technology that's available. He has a wealth of information, books and DVDs and website, and you can subscribe and you get updates and all kinds of great things. Point is, at this stage of my research, it needs to be an indoor growing environment. Aquaponics needs to be a controlled environment. It can be done in a greenhouse, and that's fine. And there are new shading materials for greenhouses that block the UV but allow the photons to penetrate, allowing enough light to penetrate for photosynthesis to take place. And so those materials are available for a greenhouse. Now, you know me with my 600 cell tetrahedron. I think I have, yeah. The geodesic dome. This is the architecture that we intend to use if we set up some outdoor structures, is to use a geodesic dome. And this is quite common in the aquaponics arena, to use geodesic domes, because they are very energy efficient. They are giving you really 360-degree exposure to the sun during the daylight hours, and they're relatively inexpensive and cheap to put up. And there are many covering materials that are specifically patterned. They're pre-cut to fit various diameters of geodesic domes. So that's the way I want to go, and there's many other things I can add to that. But let me just play Murray Hallam here. And this is murrayhallam.com. He has several websites, but you can easily find him. This is called Discover the Potential of Aquaponics. And again, I appreciate his demeanor. His delivery, I think, is very warm and genuine. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this.
Hi, I'm Murray Hallam, and I've taught thousands of students over the years about aquaponics. In fact, it's 10 years now I've been doing this, and I've just had such a fantastic time. Do you know what? I've even been featured on 60 Minutes. How about that? It's just the most wonderful thing. I want to show you the power of aquaponics and what it can do for you. Now, I don't care if you're a seasoned practitioner or you're just a raw beginner, or if you're the guy who knows a fair bit about it and you want to go right through and build your own farm. There's going to be stuff in these videos that you're going to find out, great information that we've gleaned as I've traveled all around the world. Look, I've been to all sorts of places. I've seen farms that work fantastically well, and I've seen some shockers, I've got to tell you. So I can tell you exactly how to do it. Now come with me on this aquaponics journey, and you're going to learn how to grow great, healthy fish and vegetables at your place, or for your customers, or for your charity. Whatever your need is, you can do the most wonderful things with aquaponics. And remember, this is important, aquaponics is an ecosystem.
All right, so I was just checking the chat room. Kathy, I'm not sure what you're saying. You said I can let Anthony know. You may have my email if you wish. Yeah, I'm happy to be a go-between. If you, Kathy, you want to send me your email and earmark it for someone, I'll forward it for you. However you'd like to do that, happy to help out. All right, so let me share with you this graphic. This is just the basics of an aquaponics setup, and I won't spend all day talking about aquaponics. We have other things to cover, but as you see here, we have the fish tank at the bottom. It's just an open tub, and there are a variety of fish that you can use that are fast growing. Tilapia is used around the world. You can even grow crayfish, crawdads, lobsters, crab, they have to be by, separated from fish. But really, fast-growing species so that you can harvest the fish to eat are ideal. Now what you see here in the bottom is just a lift pump. It's just pumping water up this pipe and then depositing it into this tank for the plants. Now this is kind of where you get to the hydroponics stage, and that is familiar to many people, but let me show you the growing zones here. Essentially what you are creating by adding water to this environment is a suspension medium of biologicals. The growth medium here is not really where the nutrients are coming from. Many times these are lava stone or clay pellets, things that will hold water, and that is really a medium for growing biologicals. So the microbials, the tiny little creatures that break down the waste product from the fish, break it down so that it is in a form that can be readily taken up through the root system of the plants. So it's not that the roots themselves are directly absorbing the waste product. We're talking about nitrates and nitrites and the breaking down of. So the plants aren't eating fish poop, as some people want to call aquaponics. There's a go-between, and those are the microbials that break down the nitrates into nitrates that the root system can then readily absorb. And because this is so concentrated, these root systems develop very rapidly. And as you may have seen in the video, Murray was up on a short ladder next to these fruits that they look like they're something out of the time of the dinosaurs. I mean, massive scales. We're talking about a warm growing environment. That helps, of course. But it's the rapid development of the root systems that rapidly take in from the microbials the nutrients that they need. So that's where I say aquaponics is better than hydroponics, because hydroponics you have to artificially introduce the chemicals that the plants need. And so there's the cost of the chemicals, there's the cost of the production of them, there's the cost of their transportation of them. You're dependent upon a system of delivery, whereas in an aquaponics it's a closed loop system. And as you know, fish reproduce. So you have breeding tanks that are not connected to growing, but you have breeding tanks that are providing the small fry, that's what a small fish is, the small fry to the growing tanks. And as they get to a large enough size where they can cohabitate, they can commingle with larger fish without being victims of predatory activity by larger fish, they can be introduced into the population. And thereby you have a closed loop growing system. Now, when we talk about growing systems that are dependent upon grow lights and electric pumps and things like that, the question of electricity comes up, and that's easily resolved nowadays. We have high efficiency solar panels, high efficiency wind generators, and high efficiency deep cycle marine type batteries, where you can support a lighting system at low cost, and you can back that up with a propane or a gasoline or diesel generator system for a worst case wintertime power outage scenario. So really your ability 365 days of the year to grow indoors, even in the dead of winter. There are many people in Alaska that are using aquaponics to grow food all year round. So we're no longer dependent upon the sun or the temperatures of the environment. Now the worms are in there, which is kind of interesting, because the worms you do want to introduce not so much for the benefit of the plant as it is the benefit of the biologicals, the microbial environment. And they really help that out. But also you're growing food for the fish, because now the question is, where does the food for the fish come from if you have a closed loop system? Well, here's one idea, and there are many, but it is in a pond, indoor pond or outdoor pond, growing what is known as duckweed, D-U-C-K, duckweed. Duckweed is a plant that grows on the surface of the water, and it is prolific. It doubles its quantity, not just the size of the individual plant, but it replicates and doubles the number of plants every 24 hours. And duckweed is high in protein, and the fish love it. Now you can supplement it with other things as well for the fish, but what aquaponics is really moving away from in the feeding of fish is the harvesting of fish from the sea, meaning that many fish are fed by way of ground up fish meal. And of course, if we're trying to get away from the use of diesel fuels and sending boats out into the ocean to harvest fish, only to then dry them and grind them up and feed them to fish, that's self-defeating. Excuse me. Sorry about that. What we are trying to get to is a self-sufficient system of growing just for ourselves and for our community if we want to scale to that. But again, duckweed is one example. There are many other protein sources that you can develop on your own property, indoors and outdoors, to take care of the fish. Alrighty. So here's some examples of how the plants themselves are arranged. Now we have the fish in the tanks, and you can certainly use tanks, much as in the hydroponics example. You can have the plants, as I showed you in the previous slide, with their roots. Sorry about that, folks. I did turn this off. Is having that ability to place the plants themselves in these structures. Now these are on the left called growing towers, and there are many that are commercially available. You can make these yourself out of 4-inch and 5-inch PVC drain pipe and rain gutters and things like that. But the point is here, it doesn't have to be in a water-based tank. You can bring the water to these structures, and this is where in the inner city environments, converting warehouses into greenhouses is taking place. And the roots themselves are receiving the nutrients by way of a sprinkler system. The example to the left, the growing tower, at the top is a sprinkler, a water sprinkler, just a small one, that creates droplets of water that then rain down inside the tube itself. And there is typically a growth medium provided in there. You can use natural materials, or you can use things like filter material for high volume air exchange systems, HVAC systems that have fiberglass woven fiber filters. You can cut that up and put it down inside these vertical pipes. And what that does is provide a place for the water to trickle down across these filters, or you can use natural materials. And as the water trickles over the surface area, it begins to develop this microbial environment. The microbes grow on this filter substrate. The roots themselves are in contact with that filter substrate. They insert into the opening, and then the roots are dangling inside the pipe and in contact with the filter substrate, and thereby in contact with the microbes that they need to uptake from the water sprinkler system, the water stream, the nutrients. Now the water stream is being fed by a pump that is in the fish tank. So your fish tank can be anywhere, and you can have them scaled to whatever operation you have, and the water is then pumped to this vertical farming arrangement. Same thing with the other two examples. Just different ways to arrange the plants, but they are all in contact with a substrate that contains the microbial environment for the conversion of the waste products into material that the plants can use, the nutrients. Very energy efficient. And again, you're looking at examples of young plants. These become massive in size, and therefore many times these are taken from the structure that you're seeing here and placed in a expanded structure that allows for the larger growth, the larger size of development of the plants. Now, it may sound labor intensive, but for the most part, there's not much labor. There's the labor of initially inserting the plants in their little holes, in their growth areas, and then transplanting them to a larger area if need be. You could set it up to where they were spaced enough in their initial planting to where they could go to a full-scale form, and then a one-time harvest takes place. Or you can harvest these, much like in the leaf examples, you can harvest these as they're growing, as you need them. So if you're going to make a salad, you go to your aquaponics garden, you take what you need from your garden, and you have your meal. I mean, it's very efficient and very rapid growing. One of the questions that oftentimes comes up is how much water is used. Now, Murray Hallam set up his operation that is now quite extensive, and he set that up in Australia in the desert, because the typical farming operations in a desert are really not economically viable. But the use of the water is so controlled because you're in a greenhouse environment, you're indoors. The ability to capture the moisture and recirculate that moisture from the environment itself can be done. But the water that is passing through the root systems in these vertical farming arrangements and in the water tank horizontal bed configurations, that water does not experience much in the way of true evaporation because it's not exposed to the wind and it's not exposed to the sun in terms of evaporating out of the greenhouse environment. So the figure typically cited is that it uses only 10% of the water that goes through the system. 90% of the water that is initially introduced into your system is recycled, it's captured. And you do have a filter system just to take out, large particles and things that, like worms that get into the system. But for the most part, the filtering is very simple and returns clean water back to the fish, and the cycle continues. And the fish don't require a whole lot of maintenance either. And just a regular harvesting of the larger ones will promote the growth of the community. So very, very simple and very low in terms of, labor intensive operations. I mentioned the backyards. Here's an example that Murray put together, combining the horizontal bed tanks farming as well as the vertical farming. And these are all recycled materials, and again, driven by low energy, high volume but low pressure water pumps and filter systems that use very little energy. There's typically 12-volt pumps running off a 12-volt battery system that's backed up by an inverter that runs off your solar cells and your wind generators. So easy for anyone who's not an engineer, not a software person, not a farmer, to set something like this up. Now I should have said this at the beginning, I don't get anything for advocating this. I'm not tied with Murray Hallam or anything like that. I'm just a fan of what he has done and the message that and the mission that he has been promoting around the world now for many years. So just a great guy, and I applaud what he's doing, and I think it's something that we can all examine for our own use. And it may spark some people that, that may have a small farm. You may have a small operation already in which you have a garden outside and You're growing for your family, you're growing for maybe a small community, and it may spark your interest if you haven't really taken a look at aquaponics. Or if my endorsement of it means anything, take it for what you will, but I think you would find that your cost of food production and your efficiency of food production and your ability to grow in all seasons would be just a huge improvement economically on what you're doing. And I think it would grow your customer base, being able to provide in the dead of winter fresh fruits and vegetables to your customers that otherwise would have to pay a premium, or the foods may not even be available. Okay? So let me see what else we have here. Let's see if I covered all the examples. Yeah, I guess that's probably good enough. But I'll share with you, our plan is to, if we decide to stay here in New Hampshire, is to look at the feasibility of doing this, with our own basement, much like you would be able to do in a snow environment where most of the homes do have basements already that can be readily converted, or to a location where we have outbuildings that we can build, like I said, the geodesic domes, and be able to do it that way. That way you're able to take advantage of sunlight to offset your energy bills if you have, the space to do that. One thing I should mention about fish, if you, certainly in areas that are near bodies of water, streams, lakes, rivers, even the ocean itself, you're going to need to get permits for the fish, because you cannot bring in an invasive species, and that goes for the plants as well. But that's not a big deal, and Murray covers all of that in his learning materials. So just check with your local people and all those good, admonitions that are always put out. Okay, so let me see if anybody has any questions at this point on any topic. It doesn't have to be aquaponics. Jonathan says he's in the process of converting his backyard into a garden. That's great. Consider going with the aquaponics. As I said, a lot of what Murray recommends is using recycled materials. So in this picture that is up, these are food grade plastic shipping containers, and the outside metal framework is part of the shipping containers. So you've probably seen this. These are cube in shape, and they can be easily cut, with an electric jigsaw. You can easily cut these into shapes that you want and reuse the framework itself to hold the tank, and they form your tanks and your growing beds. So those can be readily obtained, very inexpensive. Just make sure that they're food grade. Make sure that they've never had any other types of chemicals like pesticides and acids and alkalines in there, because plastic holds those materials. It gets embedded in the pores of the plastic. So only food grade, for obvious reasons. Okay? Alrighty. So again, just as a starting point for research, just checking the chat room, go to murrayhallam.com, and that'll get you started. And then that's where I started. He was the first guy I ran across. Just a pleasure just to listen to him as well. He's a very good teacher. But the size, again, I want to emphasize this and we'll move on. The size of the fruits and vegetables that you're growing, because there's so much concentrated nutrient available, and the growth of the root system is so prolific, that the end result is not only fast growth rate, but just huge quantities and huge sizes of the fruits and vegetables that you're growing, because they're in a very healthy environment. They don't have to struggle with the wind, struggle with the heat, struggle with the cold. There's no pesticides. I didn't even mention that. you don't really have, and because you're growing indoors, you don't have a need for pesticides. So that cost, but also those detriments to our health are eliminated. And so you also have a plant that's not under stress because it's having to deal with pests, the invasive species of plants and animals. There's really no weeding that's taking place in these situations because you're growing each plant in an isolated pocket. And because you're cutting off from the blowing in of seeds from weeds and invasive plant life, you're able to cut that off. Now, you do want to introduce things like ladybugs into the environment. And someone had asked me years ago about raising bees, plants that require the pollination by way of bees. And that's something that a lot of aquaponics farmers do, is that they have on their property 1 or 2 beehives for the pollination of the plants. Now, plants themselves have to have male and female in many cases as well. So all of those are things that are just part of the learning curve, and you just plan for that, and then you build your infrastructure for it. But I think it's fun. I think it's cool. And imagine, I've seen some people with fish tanks, and they will cut a small window and insert a piece of clear plexiglass that's watertight, creating a window in the tank for kids to be able to view the fish. Because one thing you don't want to do is lift the lid over your tank, and it needs to be covered. Fish want to be in the dark. Lift the lid and, pick out a fish with a net or something to show off to the kids so they can see the kids. Fish don't tolerate stress very well. They don't tolerate handling. And so to maintain a low stress environment is healthy for fish. But providing those viewing windows for people to be able to see the fish and to learn what you're doing, just a great source of entertainment. It's kind of like a petting zoo, okay? So I'm looking forward to this. I think this is just an extraordinarily positive thing to be researching and to be sharing with other people. And I'm really getting enthusiastic about it. I hope that Kathleen and I have the opportunity to relocate again, but for, I think, a final time, to a location where we can have geodesic domes outside and set up these aquaponics. And I would like to be able to do it on a semi-commercial basis, to be able to offer it to restaurants and even local grocery stores, so that the community is benefiting from good, healthy food. And I think that's something that we can contribute, to the community. Anyway, food for thought, right? I say that on purpose. Alrighty. Thank you, Free to Sing. I appreciate that. Yeah, today is Sprung Day. I think we'll have t-shirts, right? Welcome to Sprung. It's the first day of Sprung. Okay, I'm just being ridiculous. By the way, in order to grow aquaponics, you have to be old and bald, like Murray and myself. All right, let's talk about something completely different. I shared this with you through some of the postings in Patreon. Tongue in cheek, okay? Tongue is firmly planted in the cheek. This is just having a little bit of levity and a little bit of fun. I'm such a serious guy all the time. I try to find ways to make things a little bit humorous. So here's my second book. You're all familiar with this. There's my 600 cell tetrahedron. But I haven't said much about the manta ray that I named after Steve Irwin. The manta ray in relationship to the British Royal Navy. Now, some of you may have listened to my broadcasts on Truth Frequency Radio. And about, a year and a half ago, Kev Baker and I were talking about the fact that the Royal Navy held a design competition for naval warcraft, okay, surface and subsurface. And this is the winning design from the Royal Navy. And again, this is almost 2 years ago. This won first prize in their competition for a new type of submarine. I shared with you the 2 articles from back then, and I'll pick out some of the highlights out of that. But I think you would agree with me that whoever submitted their design, let's say they borrowed from my idea. What do you say in chat? What do you guys think? I like to see how you react to that. Dave, dry humor. Well, submarines aren't dry, Dave, but I get it. I get it. I love the dry British sense of humor. I wish I could emulate it better, but anyway, point is, let me go to my email where I keep my notes. I would like to find, there it is. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of the coverage on this. Just again, a diversion away from all the doom and gloom stuff we always cover. In 2015, the Royal Navy released its concept of the surface warship of 2050. Now the Royal Navy is casting its crystal ball upon 2050 by asking a team of young engineers from UK Nest to develop concepts for future British submarines with designs that mimic sea animals. The manned and unmanned concept undersea vessels are intended to handle a variety of tasks in a future world experiencing intense competition between nations for ocean resources. This comes to us courtesy of newatlas.com. David Snondy, I think is his name. The Royal Navy looks to nature for futuristic sub-concepts, and that was dated August 28th of 2017. So quite a while ago, but I published 2048 Diamonds in the Rough in February of 2014. 2014, years before they even put out the request for designs. So I'm going to take credit for it. All right? All right, let's see what else they've got in here. Taking nature as their inspiration, the graduate and apprentice engineers came up with ideas that melded bleeding-edge technology with simplified, complex systems to produce more flexible and cheaper vessels. Now this one they call the Nautilus 100 Mothership. The first and keystone concept is the Nautilus 1000 Mothership. Well, the title says 100, but the text says 1000. Anyway, a cross between a whale and a manta ray, the Nautilus is conceived as a command and control submarine that not only acts as an information hub, but is also a weapons carrier. Thanks to advanced autonomous systems and neuro-interfacing that allows control by thought, the submarine only needs a crew of about 20. In a further biometric touch, steering and depth control would be by means of flexible wingtips that can alter their shape like a living fish. Now, all of that is in my book. Some of you have read my book, and you would back me up on that. Yep, the AI saw it. That's funny, Jonathan. The AI saw it. Yeah, probably. So let me describe to you my submarine without getting into a long dissertation about it. First of all, it is constructed of nanodiamonds that, like this description here, are flexible. It literally propels itself through the water and through the air by moving its wings, exactly as a manta ray does. Manta ray will fish by leaping out of the water. They hunt for food, but it's also a mating ritual, the leaping out of the water, and many of you have seen photographs of that. And in the storyline, in the book, the manta ray does have brief periods of flight. Okay, but the body of the submarine is flexible, just as with the manta ray itself in nature, made of nanodiamonds. It also, by way of the diamonds, because of the hard structure, it is pretty much impervious to weapons systems. The submarine is manned by a holographic crew. Now, of late, you and I have had discussions about Holographic images. The February issue of Entangled magazine, I talk about the image of the first beast being a solid hologram, indistinguishable, okay, from humans. This is the crew of the submarine. In fact, the Navy SEALs, the humans that come on board the submarine, they don't, until much later in the storyline, do they even realize that these holographic crew members that they're with, that are operating the sub, are in fact holograms. This is back in 2014 that I published this. Now, the submarine is sentient. It is self-aware. And the crew referred to the computer as Steve because the submarine, as I said, is named after Steve Irwin. That's in honor of him. Okay? So they, in conversation with the computer, they call him Steve. And he starts out as a young teenage boy in his expression, in his communication with the crew. But during the storyline, he begins to advance as an artificially intelligent, sentient life form operating the submarine. He begins to advance in his age and thereby in his knowledge and his wisdom. And at the end of the story, he's 33 years old. Well, this exemplifies how AI has been developing today. Okay, I presented this in 2014. AI does the same thing. It is self-learning. And in fact, the main character of the storyline, Jim, he has a brain-computer interface. It's not a piece of hardware. It's not a chip. It is the nanodiamonds within his own body that allows him to connect with the nanodiamonds of the quantum computer. Steve, his sentient mind, his AI, is contained within a 600-cell tetrahedrally shaped quantum computer that is 6 feet in diameter within the hull, within the center point of the submarine itself. It is comprised, the computer, of nanodiamonds. Jim has, and this is part of the mystery of the story, somehow had the introduction of nanodiamonds into his body. And by way of the nanodiamonds, his mind is connected to the mind of the computer. There's a brain-computer interface that takes place throughout the storyline in which he communicates with Steve. And Steve is teaching him. And Jim, being older than Steve in his early adolescent stage, is teaching Steve. They share information back and forth. And this enables Jim to gain access to information that he needs in the context of the adventure story as their adventures unfold. He has the advent of tapping into the AI system of Steve and vice versa. So there's this augmentation that takes place. Now, in this article, they talk about neurointerfacing that allows control by thought of the submarine. Well, Jim does the same thing. Jim is able to communicate with Steve and control the submarine by thought. He also uses hand and arm gestures and body movements. His body position dictates the movement of the submarine in the latter stages of the storyline. He actually controls the sub in its flight out of the water by manipulating his body inside the submarine. Okay? Now, navigation, one of the navigating aids that they have is behind the 3 command and control seats in the submarine is a navigation table, and it's holographic. And that holographic system produces a 3-dimensional model of the island of Cyprus. which is where they intend to make their attack. And they plan their attack on a three-dimensional, solid, holographic model of the island of Cyprus, just off of Turkey and Israel and Syria. You might want to pay attention to Cyprus, okay? As you follow along with what is going on in the Middle East, in particular with Jerusalem, pay attention to Cyprus. I picked it in the story because I imagined myself as a general wanting to set up a headquarters, a forward operating point in a very strategic location. And so I looked at Google Earth and I came up with Cyprus because of its strategic location relative to the Middle East, specifically to Israel. Turkey controls the northern half of Cyprus. The Cypriots control the southern half, and there's a dividing line, a north-south dividing line, which is a demilitarized zone controlled by the UN. The Russians have been given permission in the southern end of Cyprus to expand their naval base. Again, you want to pay attention to Cyprus in the coming days of the unfolding conflicts in the Middle East. Okay? All right. So back to the technology. The nanodiamonds first manifest in Jim as a coating over his skin. Effectively, he's kind of like Iron Man. He has a bulletproof body, and that comes out later in the story. He doesn't know that. It's a process of self-discovery. At the end of the story, and I'm purposely spoiling things, but at the end of the story, the remaining Navy SEALs, the humans, who do not have the benefit of nanodiamonds at that point, have to come to a decision as to whether they want to go through this transformation of their body by the introduction of nanodiamonds into their bodies, as happened with Jim. You'll have to read the story to find out how he was introduced by way of nanodiamonds into his body. But Jim is faced with the dilemma of not only providing this to his human crew members, but the dilemma of the rest of his organs being transformed into a nanodiamond structure, so that effectively his entire body becomes composed of nanodiamonds. I'm focusing on the submarine because there's a couple of things also that operate this sub, and one of them borrows from the Higgs boson, specifically the Higgs field. There's what is known as a Higgs drive that allows the submarine actually to move not only at high speeds but interdimensionally. Now, it's only short interdimensional transits, if you will, but the whole concept of propulsion by way of using the Higgs field, the Royal Navy didn't adopt that, but they do talk about, you know, how they are propelling the sub in their own way. They say instead of nanodiamonds, the 3D printed acrylic hull would be bonded to super strong alloys to give enough strength to withstand depths of over 1,000 meters while providing more speed and stealth. Now, in the book, the submarine is stealthy. It's virtually invisible, partly because of the use of the Higgs field. For added stealth, the Nautilus has a skin of anechoic nanometer thin scales that are bonded with piezoelectric material that allows them to be realigned to reduce drag and therefore noise, as well as absorbing incoming sonar pings. Well, nano thin scales sounds remarkably close to nano diamonds to me. And again, the skin is flexible, virtually impervious, and does absorb sonar and radar signals. So I think they read my book. They say here, for power, the Nautilus uses hybrid algae electric propulsion in cruise mode with a large-scale tunnel drive operating on the same principle as Dyson bladeless fans that force through water like a smooth jet. Now that's different from what I offered, and I think that this is really kind of old technology, but something here that caught my eye was the algae electric propulsion. Steve, the sentient manta ray submarine, absorbs energy from seawater. He gains electricity from seawater. A very basic process. It's a battery process. He also absorbs oxygen for the crew members. For those human crew members, absorbs oxygen from seawater. Now the heart that pumps through an arterial system, providing oxygen, extracting carbon dioxide for the benefit of the human crew members. That circulatory system is composed of green blood because he also draws energy in a process of photosynthesis from the sun and uses the seaborne plant life, just like they're talking about here, using algae. In the book, he uses the process of photosynthesis for energy as well. I'm going to get a name here. I'm just doing a quick Google search because I forgot the name of this plant. Yes, there it is, the koru. K-O-R-U, koru, if you want to look that up. This is a spiral fern from New Zealand, and this is the design for the heart of the circulatory system within the submarine. If you look closely at the images of a koru and a fern, and let me just go ahead, I'll grab one of these and I'll post it real quickly right here. Here we're talking about Australia, now we're going to New Zealand. Let me get rid of that from a previous live stream. Let me just get a new one. Jump that up there. Okay, this is the koru fern. This is the design of the heart in the submarine that pumps green blood, green fluid, throughout the sub. The reason I picked this is because it is fractal. You see the ferns within the fern, and there are more ferns within the ferns. This is a fractal plant, meaning that the heart itself, designed this way in a fractal nature of all these multiple chambers, just like the chambers in the heart, has an unlimited pumping capacity for fluids. Now, maybe you may not find that terribly intriguing, but I do. Anyway, let's go back to this article real quickly and we'll kind of wrap it up. The Nautilus's advanced multispectral low-power active and passive sensors are molded into the hull itself. In addition, there's a recovery bay for docking with underwater stations, as well as releasing and recovering drones and decoys. Same thing as in my book. It has an underwater docking bay. Now, a manta ray does have a tail. Just like a stingray, the manta ray in my design has a tail. I did that again because of referencing Steve Irwin, and you know that he was tragically killed by the spike from the tail of a stingray that penetrated his heart. The tail in this submarine is used as a tool deployment system. The end of the tail has interchangeable tools, and at the beginning of the story they recovered 2 nuclear warheads from a Russian submarine in the Pacific Ocean, and they used the tail to retrieve those nuclear warheads. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the submarine that sunk, and there was a recovery operation that was put together by the CIA. And if you read the book, I give you the backstory on all that. It's fascinating. It involves a submersible dry dock, and that plays into it. Some of you may have seen a few years ago, back in about 2011, discussions of things called the Google barge in San Francisco and also on the East Coast. A Google barge is involved, and also a stealth above the water, a surface craft, a stealth naval vessel that was built in conjunction with this submersible. But that submersible dry dock was built to house a recovery device, a claw type device, for snatching off the bottom of the ocean this Russian submarine. So I incorporate all of those things, including the dry dock, the Google barge, and the surface stealth naval vessel built in the San Francisco Bay at Lockheed, at the South Bay, right in the heart of the Silicon Valley. All of that's in that book. And there's a whole lot more. There was an article, I don't know if I shared it with you, I'm not going to reference it right now, but an article that I shared with you of some other technology that involves what I call micro accelerators. Stanford Linear Accelerator developed at SLAC, it's called. They developed accelerators on a chip. These are particle accelerators. They're linear accelerators on the size of a semiconductor microchip. And there's been some articles that just came out this week. I think I shared some of those with you through Patreon. These accelerators on a chip, and they're starting to come out in the media even more now. In 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, as well as in Covert Catastrophe, the first book, I took the micro accelerators on a chip and housed them in stainless steel balls that are about the size of a quarter, and I call these micro accelerators. They are a weapons system. Now, the Royal Navy, to my knowledge, hasn't stolen that idea, but they are used by the crew in 2048 in the submarine, and they are also used in Covert Catastrophe against the what I call the S wave. I didn't call them D wave, I called them S wave. There is such a thing in particle physics as a D wave and an S wave. They are cousins of one another in physics. But the S wave I borrowed and used that as the name of the quantum computing company. And the micro accelerators in the form of stainless steel balls that can be operated like you would operate a radio-controlled model helicopter, they are used as a weapon system. Now there's another weapon system, and this comes out of Denmark. This was some research done in 2010 in which they produced a series of crystals, metallic crystals, that absorb oxygen. Prior to absorbing oxygen, they're red. These are red crystals. And when they absorb oxygen, they turn black. That's used as a weapon system in 2048 Diamonds in the Rough against the mercenaries that are trying to protect the primary, the 2048 model quantum computer. There's a network of computers in the storyline. There are 1024 model computers that are controlled by the 2048 quantum computer. And it is on Mount Olympus at the top of the island of Cyprus where a British Royal Navy, this is all factual, British Royal Navy radar installation sits atop Mount Olympus on the island of Cyprus. And the mercenaries take over that facility, and they install the 2048 diamond quantum computer, nano diamond. It's not nano diamond, I shouldn't say that, but the quantum computer built by S-Wave is housed in a concrete bunker on top of Mount Olympus. And they use the micro accelerators to attack the mercenaries, and they also use these red crystals to suffocate the mercenaries. So spoiler alert, I've ruined the whole book, but there's a lot more in there, and it's an adventure story. I'm not a great writer like my wife. My wife wrote a fabulous book that you know about. It's called Pigtails and Potter's Field. She is a much better writer than I am. But at least I got the story across, and I used the storyline as a vehicle for the vehicle of the submarine, the manta ray, and the other associated technologies. So maybe some of these things you'll begin to start seeing maybe in a movie, or out of the Royal Navy or the U.S. Navy. They'll start talking about some of these weapon systems, some of these technologies that I presented in 2014. Anyway, that was kind of a long infomercial for my books. I appreciate your patience with me. Sometimes I have to do things a little differently. There was something else I wanted to share with you. Yes, let's go to the cow. But I'm in check chat room, okay? Let's see what you guys are talking about here. All right, so I just wanted to check the chat room. I like to stay connected to you guys. Back to my email for some notes on articles that I want to share with you. I gave you at the beginning the discussion about Google's gaming cloud. And I also sent you an article about computer growing hydroponics that was related to this aquaponics discussion. So take a look at that computer growing video. It's only about 6 minutes long. Again, I applaud his efforts, and especially making his software open source. Okay. Give me a second here. I had so many emails that stream in on top of the ones that I set aside. Okay, so here's a point on technology. I mentioned Argonne National Laboratory in our discussion of quantum internet in the last two live streams. Well, Argonne National Laboratory is in the news yesterday, and this is something that I discussed with you about a year ago, that Argonne was involved, as well as Oak Ridge National Laboratory, in developing supercomputers. Well, Argonne is announcing their exascale computer, and it's going to go live in 2020, 2021, probably fully deployed in 2021. But this will be the largest parallel processing computer in the world. So take a look at that, the exascale computer. I won't go into a lot of details on it because it's just being updated. I mean, they're just giving updates as to the development and deployment of this. And this is coming out of what they call the Aurora program at Argonne National Laboratory, an exascale computer. Again, this is classical computing. These are transistors. These are parallel processors in the millions. Millions of parallel processors all networked together. Still not on par with a quantum computer in certain applications. And again, you always have to talk about the specific application that a computer is being asked to perform. So when you try to compare a classical to a quantum computer, it's always going to be apples to oranges, okay, because of what you're asking the solution to be derived. Okay. AI, a little bit of news on AI today. AI dividing up the world. And what I mean by that is we are quickly dividing the world into two camps. And this is a trend that I want to share with you, and another trend that I'll share with you in just a moment to follow up with that. But the trend in AI from 30,000 feet, our big picture perspective today, is that the world is being divided into the have and the have-nots with respect to AI. Okay? So what that means is that the competition that I've been sharing with you for the advancement in AI, those areas of the world's population that are not at the leading edge of AI will be locked out. They will be the first ones not to benefit from AI. Now, benefit is something you'd have to define from a benevolent versus malevolent perspective. I'm saying that even in the world of aquaponics and in the world of using computing open source software for computer controlled growing of plants and fish is a benevolent application where AI can be used as a system to monitor the pH, the water temperature, the circulation, the purity of the water, the level of bacterial microbes, providing that conversion of fish waste into food source for the plants. All of those systems of monitoring, including the electrical systems, can be done by a very rudimentary AI system. And I would applaud that. I would put an AI software system in to my aquaponics setup if I were going to do that. But that's a very low-level application of AI. But the world that does not adopt AI at the leading edge economically is going to be reduced to a serf class. Those communities, those societies, those areas of the world will be reduced to the serf, S-E-R-F, serf class, related to those in comparison to those that do have the leading edge of AI. That's why the competition is on. Yes, you can put it in business economic terms, in terms of capitalism and strategic advantage. But look at a society like the Chinese, a communist society, a dictatorship. The race is on, and I've shared many articles with you of the advancements of AI between the United States and China. We can talk about Russia and Europe in general, but just on the China versus the U.S., the Chinese, by virtue of their huge population compared to that of the U.S., have a distinct advantage. And they know that their populations, in order to survive, have to have the leading edge of AI. That's why they're such control freaks. It's about controlling the population for survival of the population in China. Okay? Now, I'm not promoting the Chinese way of life, their political way of life, their control system, certainly not. I'm just giving you the context of why they are such control freaks, because it is literally survival of their population. Their ability to grow food, their ability to employ, their ability literally to survive because of their burgeoning population. And yes, they do have population control, but it's still a growing population. So that's really what it comes down to, is survival. And those countries that don't survive by way of AI will fall by the wayside, and they will be the victims of those societies, those first world societies that do have AI, at the highest levels. Okay? So that's the big picture snapshot, if you will. Let's talk a little bit about delivery. We've been talking about food, so I want to talk about food delivery and the big picture on that. As you know, Amazon has been deploying, along with FedEx and other delivery services like UPS, deploying of drones. Now, this only really applies in the densely populated city environments, but delivery by drone, and something that Amazon about 6 years ago said we're going to have aerial drones deploying for delivery purposes. Now, there's been a lot of controversy and restrictions with city governments as to, having drones flying around in their cities. But whether they're aerial drones or ground-based drones, the delivery of food specifically, not just, your computer hardware and your toys and your games that you want delivered, but food delivery is at the tipping point, at the tip of that whole process. So you have to pay attention to what Amazon's doing, but also Walmart is involved in this competition. Target is involved in this. The major grocery chains are involved in the struggle to provide enough delivery capacity. They can't hire a stable workforce of humans to do this. They can't get enough people that remain long enough as a stable workforce to maintain a delivery system. The infrastructure that it takes to supply the delivery methods, whether they're trucks, drones, aerial, the infrastructure to support food delivery is what others outside of Amazon are struggling with. So here's the long-term picture that I share with you as I observe and read the articles related to this. Amazon has quickly set itself up as having the infrastructure that everyone else is trying to copy. It's years ahead in setting up those infrastructures that support food delivery. Now, fold this into the discussion of the cloud-based computing systems. You have Amazon Web Services, AWS, about to be awarded that $10 billion cloud computing contract with the intelligence communities and the Pentagon. Understand that behind that are all of the cloud-based systems that Amazon already has. In order to make food delivery and its basic infrastructure of people and delivery mechanisms and warehousing of the food and the automation of the movement of the food from its racking system into the delivery vehicles, all of that automation, all of that robotic system in their warehouses has to be run through a cloud-based system. This is where Walmart and Target and grocery store chains are struggling. They don't have the cloud capacity, much less the warehouse capacity, much less the delivery vehicles, be they trucks or drones or both. They're playing catch-up to Amazon. So remember, I said to you that back in 1998 and 99, Jeff Bezos was saying his business model was to sell you everything. And it begins with food. The big picture is this is the control of the distribution of food. So I began our discussion today about growing your own food in aquaponics. Even a home-based system on a small scale of highly nutritious food supplement sources, fruits and vegetables, okay, for your own family, because Amazon wants to sell you everything, including your food. And as you know, in commerce, the heartbeat of commerce, the heartbeat of a capitalistic driven system, even a dictator, socialistic, communistic, fascist pick your poison system. The heart of any system of society is distribution of goods and services and food. That's where Amazon put its business model when it first started selling used books. How does a used book retailer sell you everything around the world? Well, you are seeing it unfolding right now, and I have shared with you the components of how that is accomplished. And I've shared with you that Amazon and Google and Facebook and others have their origins financially in the intelligence community. And the intelligence community gathers intelligence through the Internet of Everything, through nanosensors, through carbon-based graphene wafers at the nanoscale in size, in the food wrappers and embedded in the foods to track that food, its production, its distribution, and the consumption, and the waste product of, that sounds gross, but tracking the waste product as well. Okay? All of that is driven by the nanosensors connected by way of the Internet of all things through the cloud system of all things to Amazon as one example, but you can add in Facebook and Google with their goals and aspirations. It is all about the distribution of goods and services and food, and that's the control mechanism of food, and that is the infrastructure of the beast system. And unless you take the mark of the beast, you will not be able to buy or sell anything through Amazon. Walmart will fall. Here's my prediction. I don't make predictions, but I'll make a prediction. Amazon will either buy out Walmart, and don't worry about the rumors floating around about Amazon, supposedly Jeff Bezos saying that Amazon's going to go bankrupt. That's smoke and mirrors. Expect Amazon either to buy out the controlling shares of Walmart, thus absorbing Walmart and all of its infrastructure and customer information, which is why it bought Whole Foods. It wasn't about the stores, it wasn't about the employees, it was about buying the customer data of the customers of Whole Foods. That's why Amazon bought Whole Foods. Overlay that onto Walmart. Okay? They'll either buy them out or they will force Walmart out of business. If I was a betting man, which I'm not, I would say it would be the latter, that they will force Walmart out of business. Just like Amazon forced Toys R Us and Babies R Us out of business. My money would be on Walmart going bankrupt, and Target, and all grocery store chains in the country being forced into bankruptcy by Amazon. I think that the cloud, the $10 billion contract, goes beyond the intelligence and Defense Department communities. I think that this huge consolidation of clouds really involves the consolidation of all clouds. Here's how I make that point. Remember D-Wave. Amazon is a blue ribbon, first in the door investor in D-Wave. Amazon was founded by the intelligence community, predating D-Wave. The intelligence community used the structure of Amazon to launder money into investing in D-Wave, also directly out of DARPA. $10 million direct funding from DARPA for D-Wave. Okay? Google owns the 2000Q D-Wave, the 2048 chipset. Amazon as well. Facebook as well. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Livermore National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, Volkswagen, Temporal Defense Systems, Lockheed Martin in association with USC. Okay, these are military, industrial, academic, and intelligence communities. I'll say that again. Military, industrial, intelligence, and academic. All four of those communities are self-supporting, are interwoven within one another. They are kissing cousins. They are in each other's pocket, including the academic, the universities. They feed off of each other. They support each other. This is the consolidation of the clouds. Keep that scenario in mind as I go forward with live streams and I share more evidence of evil with you. It is the consolidation of the clouds that is underway that we see from 30,000 feet. If you know about business acquisitions, if you know about, in the business world, consolidation of business sectors, consolidation of industries, this is a normal business practice to consolidate like businesses and services into one entity. They typically justify it by calling it's economies of scale. Economies of scale derived by minimizing duplication of personnel and duplication of infrastructures into one infrastructure. In the military, industrial, intelligence, and academic communities, you have multiplicities of redundant systems and personnel. The consolidation of the clouds is to promote efficiencies of scale. Okay? So when you see these articles coming out, and articles that I post into Patreon and share with you, and you see these trends, this is the big picture. Consolidation of the clouds. That results in a one world system in which Amazon sells you everything. Okay? Let me check the chat room. Okay. Thank you guys. I appreciate your encouraging comments as well. Your chat room comments and your emails are always encouraging to Kathleen and myself. It is that two-way conversation that keeps us going. As I said at the beginning of this live stream, it can be very discouraging. It can be very much a heavy weight to be doing what we're doing. I have this picture of this poor cow up here. Let me divert for a moment and explain this. I sent you an article, I do believe, and you'll see many more coming out about growing our beef. They're playing up the sad face of the cow to say, you know, it is not right for us to be butchering livestock and then eating them. And all that it takes to raise livestock, the diesel fuel community, you know, way of farming and ranching, the diesel fuel, if you will, as my touch point on part of the problem with livestock and the butchering of livestock. Yeah, it's not a nice thing to think that these animals are giving up their life for us. But you know, we've been doing this ever since man killed his first dinosaur. Okay? Domestic cattle, domestic livestock, they're there to support our way of life today. I like a good steak. Now, do I want an animal to be butchered in a way that the animal suffers? Obviously not. there are humane, if you have to call it that, humane ways of butchering animals for us to consume. We need that protein. There are other sources of protein that I cited for you, like fish. And I love fish. Unfortunately, the oceans are polluted. Look at the Pacific Ocean. Don't forget about Fukushima. Okay? You want to raise fish in an aquaponics environment, free as you can make it from radiation pollution, right? Same thing for cattle and dairy products. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to push this whole thing that livestock are not humanely slaughtered. Therefore, we need to genetically grow our own meat. Now, many of you have seen the stories already. This isn't really breaking news. But growing genetically modified meat in the laboratory that supposedly has the same taste and texture to the meats that we consume from livestock. That's where they're pushing us. That's what Amazon's going to be selling through the distribution system. You can grow your own meat in the form of fish. High quality protein and fish oils and vitamins and minerals in fish. I would say that probably the way that Kathleen and I are going is away from beef altogether because of what they're already doing with beef, as you know, with the pharmaceuticals in beef. But when they start eliminating livestock and replacing it with genetically modified and laboratory grown beef, remember the old Wendy's commercial with the elderly lady? This goes back probably 15, 20 years. The old Wendy's commercial, "Where's the beef?" That was a great series of commercials. Where's the beef? And that's what we're going to be saying, Kathleen and myself. So I think we're going to primarily be raising our own fish and our own lobsters and our own crab, which is really sad for the fishing industry. One of our favorite places to visit are the fishing communities. I love boats, I love boating, sailing, and I love and appreciate the fishing craft out there. Lobster boats, crab boats, salmon fishermen, crab fishermen, lobster fishermen. That's a way of life. That's a community. Those build communities, and it's really sad to see those going away. The maritime way of life going away because of the polluting of the oceans. And that they want to force us into the Amazon way of life. The Amazon distribution system, the consolidation of the clouds, the control of information, and the control of goods and services, and the control of our food. And that's why I said there's a dividing of humanity. Those that have AI and those that don't. It is sad. We tried to start on a up note, a sprung day instead of sprung day today, and talk about our aquaponics. So let's finish there. Matthew 4:19, and he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. It's not just fish. It's the casting of our nets to our fellow human beings that are facing the onslaught of the same things that you and I are talking about. Humanity is definitely at risk, and it's only getting worse. So we have to have an alternative to this, and that's Jesus Christ. That's the Holy Spirit. That's the Word. The encouragement comes from the Word. I try my best. I try to be a good disciple. And I encourage you to be a good disciple and to cast your nets. But the encouragement comes from the Word and through prayer and that building of that relationship with Jesus Christ. I refer to it for myself as a walking conversation with Him. He and I just converse all the time. You might describe that as, checking the spirit within yourself. I'm far from perfect, that's for sure. I have a lot of things I struggle with. We all do. But the encouragement within ourselves, and the encouragement when we cast our nets to help other people, is by way of sharing the gospel and sharing the word, sharing the truth. Independent media is under assault. You know that my YouTube channel, I have one copyright strike against it. I have strikes for the music I use, but it's not a copyright strike. I have one against me because Argonne National Laboratory didn't like the fact that I had used their video in their presentation of the quantum internet. And you know that I started Patreon because my channel was demonetized in September of 2016. 2016. Was it 16 or 17? No, 17. September of 2017, my channel was demonetized, and it still hasn't been reinstated. Now, I wasn't counting on that for income. That was just nothing. It was a little trickle. But it's the point. Independent media is under attack. And I thank you as patrons for supporting me and for spreading the word about the information that I'm trying to cast out as nets. And I want to share with you an example of censorship of the independent media. Many of you are aware of the online news source called WorldNet Daily, founded by Joseph Farah. I met Joseph Farah in 1997 in his office when he first started in the Sacramento area in California. Very nice gentleman. We had a great business meeting, just one-on-one. Well, I just received an email. It was a broadcast email a couple of days ago, day before yesterday, from WorldNet Daily, that they are on fumes. They've lost 80% of their revenue because of the censorship taking place by way of Google searches, Google advertising, and Facebook advertising. This has happened to me as well, and I'm struggling to get with Doug. Doug and I are trying to put together an advertising campaign on Facebook. I hate Facebook, but I'm trying to cast the nets out further to get people aware of what we are doing, both Patreon and the magazine. But I know, because Kathleen has been trying to advertise her book, Pigtails in Potter's Field, on Facebook, just sharing postings on her own page, not advertising, just postings. Posting of photographs of her book, comments, reviews, outstanding reviews of her book on her own Facebook page, and they get censored. The views, the likes are censored. She can put up something about a dog, about puppies. We have some friends that just had some German Shepherd puppies. And that'll get tremendous number of likes, but she'll post a picture of her book and nothing. One or two things. So Doug and I are going to test the waters with actual advertising, paid advertising on Facebook, to see what happens. But it's virtually guaranteed it's going to be squashed. It probably won't see the light of day. So I'm asking, like WorldNet Daily is asking, for people to spread the word. WorldNet Daily has laid off staff. They're no longer making movies. They're not publishing books anymore. They were a publishing house. They're living on fumes, as Joseph Farah stated in his editorial. That's a well-regarded conservative, Judeo-Christian-based news source, independent media news source. And they're almost out of business because of censorship. And I'm sharing that with you so that you see that there are big operations that are going bankrupt because of censorship. And my ability to talk to you is only because of your generosity. Otherwise, I'd be down working at Walmart or something. Who knows? I have more skills than that, obviously. But I am blessed with the opportunity to be a disciple, if I can put that label on myself, and be able to cast the net out there as a fisherman of men because of you. And I am extremely grateful for that, because the external forces are pushing down on independent media, including a big player like WorldNet Daily. And that's a trend that's going to continue. And the only way we're able to broadcast the truth is because you guys, ladies and gentlemen, make it possible. So I'm just saying thank you. I'm not begging for money. I'm just saying thank you. Okay? So we'll wrap it up today. I may have a special guest tomorrow. Right after this live stream, I have scheduled a Skype with this gentleman to see if there's a stable connection where he's located. See if there's a stable connection, and if I can incorporate it into the live streaming platform, XSplit, like we did with Alana Freeland. And we were fortunate with Alana that it worked. So we're going to test that in just about a half an hour. If it all works, if we don't get blocked, and there's a fairly high probability that tomorrow's live stream with this special guest is going to be interfered with. And so I've prepared some material that I will present if I'm not able to have this guest on as, to share with you tomorrow. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm just letting you know we may have a problem having a guest. I'm not going to give his name out or any of that stuff at this point. I'll put out a notice to you tomorrow morning who it is and what we're going to talk about, that our test worked, if it works today, and then we'll move on from there, and we'll try to do the live stream at noon Eastern time. Okay? I would consider him to be an insider, and that's why I say we'll probably be interfered with. He'll disclose his name, and you'll see him on camera and all that stuff, but definitely an insider with a wealth of insights. Not secret information. We're not stirring up the pot with the intelligence community or anything. But they'll be part of the discussion. So let me finish with this. Because we know that we're under surveillance all the time, I don't view you in the intelligence community as the enemy. I've said that about you all along for years. You are not the enemy. But the spirit that is driving the surveillance world, that is driving the control mechanisms, that is driving the building out of the infrastructure of the beast system, is Luciferian, plain and simple. And if you are an operative in the intelligence community, and you are surveilling myself and my activities, which I know you are, I'm not afraid of it. It's just an acknowledgement of the facts of life. It's just the way the world is now. I don't view you as the enemy. I hold no ill will against you. I pray for the salvation of your soul. You are a brother and you are a sister, human being, created by God. I pray for your salvation because it is at risk due to your involvement in a Luciferian agenda. You need to turn to God. You need to do a 180. You need to come around a full 360 back to the Creator. Okay? So that gives you a little hint of what we're going to talk about tomorrow if everything comes together. Okay? So thank you. God bless you all. And again, thank you for your support. And God willing, and if God wants it to happen, we'll be back tomorrow. Okay? So have a great sprung day. Go out and get a t-shirt. Sprung. We're celebrating Sprung. And people will wonder, what the heck are you talking about? You can just say, go listen to Anthony Patch. He made it up. Have a great Sprung day. God bless you. Bye-bye.